Welcome back to the Unabated podcast. I'm Gina Fiore. This week, Tom Viola sits down with Derek Carty from EV Analytics. They talk about the process behind his projections, keeping calm through bad weeks, and the differences between baseball and football. Please enjoy this discussion with Derek Carty.
Unabated. That's the new word, unabated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me today, no Captain Jack. He is sick with the G2E flu. It took him all of one day to be like, my voice is gone. I feel terrible. I got to bail. But no worries, because instead I'm excited for a great fireside chat here with none other than Derek Carty of EV Analytics. Derek, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the pod here today. Normally, you and I are chopping it up on Fridays here at noon Pacific time on the Blitz, our unabated EV Analytics crossover prop show. But it is great to have you on the podcast today to talk a little bit more about your process and everything you do building your models for the Bat X and for the Blitz. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This should be fun.
So how's the season been so far for you? Of course, I mean, we're getting to the very end of baseball season here. We're in the playoffs, and we're through 5 weeks now of what has been a very, very tumultuous and surprising football season. How have things been going?
So baseball season was fantastic. But baseball season is also very long. You get to accrue a huge sample size. Football's been a little up and down. I think I'm up 1 to 2% ROI, and I've had a couple of very bad weeks mixed in, including this past one. I feel like it's been a weird start to football in general, though. Like, just the whole offensive environment has kind of been weird week to week. Like, it was very, very low the first couple weeks. Everyone was like, oh, offense sucks now. Too high safeties. Teams are just going to run the ball and do dink and dump. And then last week, offense explodes, and it's kind of been going up week after week. So I know we've talked about it on the Blitz show, where maybe it's the lack of preseason preparation that we're kind of just seeing a trend of, where the first couple of weeks, the guys who didn't play in the preseason, which is most of the stars, or didn't play very much, they're not fully up to speed yet. And by week 5, by week 6 now, they kind of are. So it's a little tough when you don't really even know what the league environment is. But I'm not concerned. I mean, 5 weeks is still a very small sample of football. It's not like they've been terrible. I mean, I said I'm up, a percent or two. Just I would like to be up a lot more than that at this point. But yeah, like, this is just kind of the way betting goes. You go through cold spells, and it sucks when they're kind of at the start of the year, but that's unavoidable. You just stick with your process, and you keep going, and things will work out after a while.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the two high safeties. It's almost as if defensive coordinators get paid to figure this kind of thing out, figure out offenses to exploit new defensive tactics. Who would have thunk?
It's weird that offensive coordinators then adjust to the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's almost like everybody's getting paid to do a job except the Jets staff. But you really did hit the nail on the head. And it's not like we didn't start out slow last season on the Blitz when it came to the projections, but we eventually really started trucking along by the end of the season last year. I know even just on the show picks, which are a very small cross section of what you're betting each week, we managed to get more than up to positive. We had a nice tidy sum by the end of the season. But it does bring me to the question about the fact you talk about baseball, you have this whole big sample size because it's such an annoying sport in terms of game to game volatility, but you do have a large sample size across 162 games to branch out and realize your variance and smooth it over overall. Is it so much harder with football season because you only have 17 games? And does that mean that you're maybe a little bit slower to adjust because you're seeing things consistently regress towards a specific mean when it comes to football?
So when it comes to baseball, the great thing is that when we talk about sample size, I think there's kind of two ways to look at it. Like, the sample size of the total number of bets you're going to make versus like the actual modeling statistical, sample size thing. With baseball, it's so many more days. There's so many more things to bet on. Like, you can get a huge sample size of bets in baseball. all time, I've probably at least double the number of baseball bets that I have football. And that's because, it is 17 weeks, playoffs a little bit, maybe, whatever. Um, so to an extent, football is a smaller sample size just in terms of like the number of positive EV bets that you can make over the course of a season.
Yeah.
In terms of the actual modeling, a lot of people say, "Oh, football has such small sample sizes. There's only 16 games. Baseball has 162. Like the baseball sample sizes have to be so much bigger." And the answer is kind of yes and no, um, because sample size is not a set thing. It's not I'm blanking on the word. It's dynamic. It's
Hmm.
dependent on what you're looking at. So just to use a very easy baseball example, or even a football example, a running back's yards per carry is going to be super noisy. After 5 carries, we don't really know much about the running back. That doesn't tell us anything. It's so noisy. But if we were to track his foot speed, after 5 60-yard dashes or something, we'd have a really good idea of how fast this guy is. That's going to tell us a lot. So 5 for carries might, for yards per carry might be a super tiny sample size, but for foot speed, it's a pretty big sample size. So it's always dependent on how inherently stable every stat is. And when it comes to football stats, for the most part, they're not quite as inherently stable as baseball stats, but they're not that far behind for the most part. Some stats, like running back yards per carry, are super noisy and they never stabilize, basically. But yeah, a lot of stuff does.
So you mentioned that you went in and made a few manual tweaks this past week due to the environment that we've seen in football this season. The offense is being a little bit more down. And then it kind of came back to bite you right away. Do you find you're not making as many of these manual tweaks when it comes to football season because we seem to always come back to a certain watermark this is pretty standard, and even if we have fluctuations here, we always regress back to this mean?
Yeah, I almost never make actual manual adjustments because the system should be set up to account for everything automatically for the most part. It's not set up yet to account for, a drastic change in league environment. So I thought I had to go in last week and maybe tweak it just a little bit. Probably shouldn't have. Um, but yeah, for the most part, those kind of adjustments don't need to be made throughout a season because the system is just designed to capture a lot of that.
And Ned, do you find that some of the adjustments that you've had to make are because of some drastic league environment changes? Like, has the kickoff rule is the big one this year? I know last year in college football, which isn't something that you're necessarily modeling out, but it was the changes with the clock rules. Is the kickoff thing really that big of a deal? And is it something that you really had to adjust for?
So when a rule changes, I try to look into it in the off season. If we have any data to go on, it's a lot easier for baseball because we have like minor league data where they've tested out some of these rules and we can see, okay, well, what kind of impact did the pitch clock have on the minor leagues? And then you can update your original assumption basically for the season based on what we've seen of how the rule plays out or how we think the rule should play out, and then let the system update on top of that based on what we're actually seeing. For football, I kind of do the same thing, although we don't have as much actual data to go on. Uh, some of it was kind of conflicting on whether this was going to matter, whether this was going to matter a lot. We also had the hip drop tackle rule, which I don't think I've heard one person mention since week one.
Yeah.
Um,
You know they're waiting for that because the first call is going to be in the Super Bowl with Travis Kelce getting brought down from behind and the Chiefs get a first down and go on to win the game. It's happening.
yeah, so yeah, I will adjust if it seems like something real is happening. I mean, the teams playing a higher percentage of two high safeties was a real thing that we could see happening. Um, Offenses are going to adjust. You don't want to, whatever. So for the most part, short answer is I will make adjustments if I really think there's good data to support it. Usually I just let the system do its own thing. And the main thing is I try to be transparent about what I'm doing. So if you're using the Blitz, you can always ask me, what is going into this? What is it considering? What is it not considering? How is it, thinking about this particular facet of the game this year? And then you can kind of decide for yourself, like, okay, well, maybe I don't think the blitz is accounting enough for this too high safety thing. And so you can, while you're using it, you can say, okay, well, I think passing props are projected too high. So I'm going to manually lower them a little bit, or I'm going to lower my threshold for betting them, or whatever it would be. But the main thing is I want people to understand what goes into the projection so that they understand it. And with that, with better understanding of what you're using, more success is going to follow.
Yeah. And you mentioned that with being so involved with letting people know what's going on, being engaged with your audience and your customer base, the people that are buying these projections here. You even have your own channel in the Unabated Discord where people can just go and ask you any questions that they have about both the Blitz and the Bat X. And by the way, you can use the link in the description of this video to get in that Discord yourself. But it also means that on weeks like last weekend, you're dealing with a lot of people throwing tomatoes at you sometimes. And this is something I know Jack really wanted to ask about, but you keep a really level head through any of the criticism that comes out. And people can be like, hey, what the heck happened? We had a losing week for once, as if that's never going to happen. How do you keep such a level head and kind of block out the noise when it comes to some of that?
I mean, it can be hard because I'm human too. Like when I'm having a losing week, I'm not happy about it. I can go
Yeah.
on a little bit of tilt, not as extreme as I think some people do.
Yeah.
The main thing I think is just to realize like it's just 1 week.
Yep.
Like this system has been around for a long time. The methodology is great. The long-term track record is great. Even if I had get crushed this week, it doesn't matter. I'm still way up over
Yeah.
the long run, and I'm going to expect to be, way up going forward. So it's really just trying to keep things in perspective more than anything else. Um, and trying to kind of, I guess, captain the ship for subscribers to try to keep other people like level-headed as well. It's very easy to overreact, when you're doing poorly. And so I try to kind of draw attention to when that's happening. And okay, well, it's just 1 week. Let's relax. Maybe something really crazy unlucky happened that caused us to lose some stuff. Like I know we've had a bunch this year. Like the game script just hasn't gone the way we wanted. Like I've been on like the Sam Darnold over a couple of weeks ago, where Sam Darnold went out and had an amazing game, but they wound up winning by like 20 points when they're like 5-point underdogs or something. So he didn't have to throw enough to get his yardage prop, even though he played fantastically.
Yep.
Like you can't do anything about that. The game just didn't play out the way we thought it would. The way the line, or the way like you know the sharpest bettors in the world thought it would. So it's just, you just try to keep a level head. You try to keep things in perspective. You try to consider the context of how things played out. And the big thing is don't overreact going forward. If you have a bad week, don't be like, oh, I can't bet a lot this week. I'm scared to lose again. And don't bet more trying to chase it. Just keep a level head, keep the same process. Trust that if it's a process that has been a long-term winner, which using the Blitz, at least for me, and lots of subscribers has been,
Yeah.
you just keep doing it and it's going to be fine.
Exactly. I always remind myself of that. Like I'll look at my spreadsheet and my tracker, even after a bad week, and I look at that total number and I just go, okay, we can calm down here. Like we might be a little down this week, but we're still up way big overall. And that's what really matters at the end of the day. Once you start getting desensitized to it and just remember it's numbers on a page, it
Yeah.
makes the whole process so much easier. And even after a week like this week, where, yeah, we had a rough time, yeah, you know what? You come out and we're going to get him again next week. So
That's definitely easier said than done. I
yes,
feel like some people are going to be watching this and being like, yeah, good luck. Try, like these guys are saying it, but how's that even possible? Like,
yeah,
just over time, the more you do it, the more you go through those big ups and downs, those big swings in sports betting, which are going to happen to everybody, no matter how good of a bettor you are.
mhm.
Once you go through them, it makes it easier to withstand them the next time because you've already gone through it. You've seen how it works. You realize this is normal. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. And even with a swing like this, you're not out here saying I need to change everything about the blitz
No.
model. It's okay. We had one down week. We move on to the next. Now,
Exactly.
so what is an average day like for you? Because as you mentioned here, a lot of the systems that you have for the Bat X and the Blitz are automated at this point. So what is it that you're doing manually each day? What does a day look like for Derek Carty?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of manual adjustments needed for the systems. For baseball, I check pitch counts in the morning to make sure everyone looks good. Maybe somebody threw a simulated game, he's coming off injury, through a simulated game that's not recorded in any of the data. You have to dig through beat reports to find how many pitches he's going to throw that day, which can wind up being a big edge. For football, every Wednesday I do the manual usage adjustments for targets and carries and red zone work and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but a lot of my time is spent, I would say a lot is spent on customer service, answering questions, interacting with users, trying to help everyone get the most out of the system that they can. I'm also spending a lot of time just on back end upgrades. The systems are really good, but they're not a finished product. Like there's always new things that you can try to study or
Yeah.
account for or bake into the projections. And so a lot of my time goes towards that. Plus, I do a bunch of shows. Shows are a big part of it too.
Yeah, you do keep a very busy schedule when it comes to all the content. And again, you can check Derek out on Fridays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Blitz here on the Unabated Live YouTube channel. Um, when it goes from when it comes to a system like this, where there are a lot of people using the Blitz and using the Bad X, you really can't use market movement and market resistance as a way to gauge your success and gauge your metrics. Does it mean that you really just have to go more off the wins and losses? Because let's face it, anytime that projections get updated, anytime that you roll out your stuff, the market is going to move in your favor by virtue of the amount of people moving it.
Yeah, that's definitely been the case. And every year it seems to kind of be progressively more and more. For baseball, especially baseball strikeout props in particular, like
Yes.
they move towards the bat number like very quickly, very heavily. Um, for football in the past, it hasn't quite as much because there's so many casual football bettors, like more than there are for baseball. But this year we have noticed it moving towards the blitz numbers a lot, whether that's because people are getting sharper and that's just the sharp side to be on, whether because more people are using it. It's hard to know. The thing is, though, like even if you were using a private system, like if I was using the bat and the blitz and they weren't released publicly, I imagine I would see a lot of the same movement anyway because of the sharp side. And the movement doesn't matter that much because prop markets aren't that efficient.
Yeah.
It's not like game lines where people are getting down, hundreds of thousands of dollar bets, $1 million bets, and these lines are being shaped by incredibly sharp action. Uh, there's limits on props, and so they can only be so sharp. The CLV for props is not as meaningful.
Yeah, it's very true. It's just not the metric that you're really particularly looking at because, like you said, it's not that efficient of a market. Now, when you go from running your projections to placing your bets, what are some of the other factors that you're looking at? Like when you go in and you're saying, okay, I've run my projections, I've got the stuff that I'm looking for today. What else are you factoring in? Are you blindly going off your projection numbers, or are you looking at some other things too?
I guess I'm going off some other things too. I mean, it's mostly the projections. It's mostly I look at the projection, I try to think, okay, why is the projection doing this? And especially if I can come up with a really good reason why I think the projection's different from the market. After using it for a while, you can kind of identify, okay, the projections tend to value this thing more than the market does. And so when I see that, I can be more confident that projection, okay, that's why there's a difference. I know the market doesn't account for this well. There's definitely an edge here. That's not to say there won't be otherwise if you can't find it, because if you can't find like one factor or a handful of factors, because the system is always accounting for so many different things. You can't always identify exactly what's driving the projection or the difference relative to the market. Um, I will look at an aggregate of other projections just to kind of see, okay, do other systems think this is a good bet too? If they don't, it won't necessarily take me off a bet, but it will make me more confident if other systems are on it too. Um, Uh, and then it's kind of like, I don't want to say this and have people like misconstrue it, but like a little bit of feel, a little bit of ball knowing, which kind of is related to like that first point of like, okay, like I think it's this driving it. Um, but like there will occasionally be something, all right, well, I know this is an automated model. Maybe it's not capturing this specific thing very well. Maybe I won't bet that one.
Yeah,
Um,
like things like maybe you know what, this we don't have any priors on this rookie, but he's been consistently getting some target share. Maybe there was a little bit of bad luck involved, and he was
yeah.
getting the target share but not the receptions. Something wasn't translating, and all of a sudden he has that breakout game, and the next week you're like, he's going to be more involved in this offense than we're projecting in the system.
Yeah, because the system always has to make it has to make a judgment, an assumption about everything.
Yeah.
And some situations we can be very certain, okay, this is what the team's going to do. This is how the usage is going to work out. This is their game plan. Like we know this to a pretty high degree of certainty. And other times we don't. It's something where we have a very small sample size. We have a new coach. We have, whatever, rookies, and we just don't know. Like, okay, the system is saying it's this number on average, but really it could be anywhere between here and here, like.
Yeah.
So when it's one like that, maybe I'll be a little bit more wary of it, just because like if the projection, I guess, is more of a guess than, a scientific kind of number that it comes up with, then, I factor that in too.
Yeah, it's the reality. There, no matter how sharp you get, there's still just a little hint of vibes to everything in sports betting. Like we're dealing with human beings playing a game. There's vibes exist, and they do matter to a very small extent, but it's something that you do want to take into account. But
Yeah,
besides,
I want to
Derek,
make very clear for people. I am not recommending people go out and place their bets based on feel. Like
no, absolutely not.
definitely not.
Yes.
Use the projections. The projections are like 95% of my process is just the projections. And then the
Yes.
other 5% is kind of all this other stuff that I'll think about before placing a bet based on the projections.
Right. And then even then, that's like a tiny cross section of the other factors that are
Yeah,
involved.
exactly.
But hey, Derek, when has anybody in gambling social media ever taken a small piece out of context and blown it up into something it wasn't? That never happens in this space.
I'm going to see that clipped everywhere now. Derek Carty says feel is important for betting. We
Yep.
never thought we'd see the day.
Totally. I can already see it now. That's going to be the thing that goes viral. We'll be sure to clip it. All right. Derek, thank you so much for joining me here today. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate the time. And again, if people want to catch you with us at this YouTube channel, Unabated Live, on Fridays, 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. But where else can they catch you and all of the awesome stuff you're doing?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Derek Carty. I also do shows for Island Games with covers. I do picks with scores and odds. You can find the Bat and the Blitz for DFS purposes at Roto Grinders. For sports betting purposes, you can get the full set of projections at EV Analytics. They will plug into the simulator here at Unabated. I think that covers most of it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you are an incredibly busy man. And again, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here and every week. But for now, that is going to do it for us here on the Unabated podcast. Again, thank you so much, Derek, for being with us. And thank you so much for listening to the show. As always, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends about the show. Please be sure to drop that 5-star rating. It really does help with growing the show and getting more people involved, getting more people listening. But thank you so much for being here, as always. We'll catch you guys next week right back here. But for now, let's cash some tickets. Good luck, everybody. Have a good week.